All right, so bundle up because we're about to take a deep dive into something that'll send chills down your spine. Humanity's fascination with extreme cold.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a fascinating one.
We'll be exploring everything from classic literature and survival stories to some pretty mind-blowing science,
hmm
even touching on the concept of absolute zero.
It's amazing how the cold, this incredible force of nature, has captivated us for, well, really for centuries. It's a test of human resilience,
Hmm.
a source of both fear and awe.
Absolutely.
And it really reveals those vulnerabilities, those limits of what we can endure.
Speaking of enduring, I thought we'd kick off our journey with Jack London's To Build a Fire.
Great choice.
This story just throws you right into the heart of the Yukon, following this guy on this, I'll just say it, ill-fated trek through temperatures that would make your breath catch in your throat.
Oh, for sure. And the way London describes frostbite, the way the protagonist's mental state deteriorates, it's so visceral you can almost feel that icy air biting at your skin.
Right, it's almost like you're right there with him.
It's a powerful study of the psychological and physiological impacts of extreme cold, that's for sure.
It's more than just a simple survival story, though. I mean, London uses foreshadowing, and it creates this creeping sense of dread,
Oh, totally.
almost like a domino effect of mistakes, that make the ending feel, well, inevitable.
Yeah, it really speaks to the character's arrogance, how he underestimates the power of the cold. And honestly, that's a theme we'll see pop up a lot as we go through all this human fallibility in the face of nature's indifference.
It makes you think twice about romanticizing survival in the wild, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To build a fire is a pretty stark reminder that nature doesn't really care about our intentions.
Exactly. It's not something to be conquered.
Right. It demands respect.
And that feeling of vulnerability, that isolation you get when facing these overwhelming forces, we see that a lot in other stories too. Think about The Shining or The Thing.
Oh, good examples.
The cold becomes this menacing presence, trapping the characters, amplifying their fears.
It acts as a barrier, both physically and psychologically.
Absolutely. It makes escape seem almost impossible.
It reminds me of the experiences of real-life explorers, like Admiral Richard Byrd,
Oh, yeah.
spending 5 months alone in the Antarctic. His memoir, Alone, it really captures that psychological toll, that constant battle against the elements.
Totally. And the elements definitely win someday.
Right. And then you have the incredible story of Christopher Knight. I mean, can you even imagine living as a hermit in the Maine woods for 27 winters,
It's almost unbelievable.
never lighting a fire?
What's fascinating about Knight, though, is what his story says about human adaptability. I mean, he was terrified of sleep, convinced the cold would take him if he drifted off, so he forced himself to stay awake, pacing in the freezing darkness for hours.
Wow.
It's incredible resilience, but it's a stark reminder of how far the cold can push us right to the edge.
His story feels almost superhuman, but it also highlights a crucial difference between, well, individual survival and societal vulnerability when it comes to the cold.
You're absolutely right. Individuals can show amazing resilience, but recent events have shown us how unprepared we are as a society. Just look at those winter storms that crippled Texas.
Yeah, it was rough.
The temperatures weren't as extreme as, say, Alaska, but the impact was devastating.
No power, people stuck in freezing homes.
Mm.
It was a real eye-opener about preparedness and facing extreme weather.
It really was a wake-up call. I mean, the Texas crisis showed us that resilience to the cold doesn't just depend on individual toughness, but on infrastructure,
Planning.
investment, being prepared as a whole society.
It makes you draw comparisons to other events, like the
Mhm.
pandemic. Those kinds of systemic weaknesses, neglecting critical infrastructure, it has consequences. Preparedness is about weathering the storm, but also ensuring the well-being of everyone.
You've hit the nail on the head there. And it leads us to this fascinating paradox about the cold. It can destroy, but it can also preserve.
I see where you're going with this. Permafrost, right? Those layers of frozen ground that act like time capsules.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to think about permafrost preserving ancient organisms, artifacts, offering these glimpses into the past. But then as the planet warms and the permafrost starts thawing,
It is a little unsettling, really.
definitely raises some questions.
I mean, the thawing permafrost has already revealed human remains in places like Spitsbergen, Norway. It's a fascinating window into history, but it also brings up some complicated ethical questions.
Right, it's not just about the science.
And then there's the potential for those long dormant diseases, things like anthrax, to reemerge. That poses a serious threat.
It's almost like the past is coming back to haunt us.
You could say that.
As the ice melts, Secrets are revealed.
And the implications go beyond ancient diseases. Thawing permafrost releases huge amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere.
Greenhouse gases.
Exactly. They contribute to further warming, and it creates this vicious cycle that speeds up climate change.
So the cold thawing actually fuels the process that's causing it to thaw in the first place.
A bit ironic, isn't it?
Definitely. And it highlights how interconnected our planet systems are and what can happen when that balance is disrupted. So we've gone from the Yukon to the Antarctic, we've dug into the mysteries of permafrost, but now I want to take us in a slightly different direction. Have you ever wondered about the quest to reach absolute zero?
The ultimate cold.
The coldest possible temperature.
It's a fascinating theoretical limit. It's the point where all molecular motion stops, the ultimate absence of heat energy, really.
Like chasing a ghost, something you can get close to but never quite reach.
Exactly.
The coldest natural temperature we've ever recorded on Earth was in Antarctica. It was a negative 128 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow.
But that's still nowhere near absolute zero.
And even the coldest known place in the universe, the Boomerang Nebula, it hovers just 1 degree above absolute zero. But even that is millions of times warmer than true absolute zero.
It's incredible to think about.
It is. It makes you wonder what the implications of these extreme temperatures are for, say, space exploration.
Oh yeah, good point.
Designing spacecraft instruments that can actually function in those environments, it's a huge challenge. But it also pushes the boundaries of what we know about physics, about the very nature of matter.
It's like this constant pursuit, this pushing the limits of what we know about the cold, both in the natural world and in the lab. It kind of mirrors humanity's own relationship with it, this dance between understanding it and respecting its power.
That's a great way to put it. You know, there's a really interesting connection between the scientific concept of cold as an absence of energy and Christopher Knight's description of winter's stillness. He called it somewhere in between quiet and solitude.
Wow.
Both capture this idea of the world stripped down to its bare essence. Minimal motion, profound tranquility.
It's a beautiful and haunting image. And it's almost eerie to think that the universe itself might be headed towards a state just a fraction of a degree above absolute zero.
That's the concept of heat death, where all energy in the universe is evenly distributed. The result is a uniform temperature just a tiny bit above absolute zero.
It's a thought-provoking idea, this inevitable return to a state of ultimate cold.
It really makes you think.
It makes you contemplate our own mortality, our own fragility in the face of these massive cosmic forces. And it circles back to that idea of human fallibility, in the face of nature's indifference. We can try to understand the cold, prepare for it, even harness its power.
Sure.
But ultimately, it operates on a scale that dwarfs our concerns.
It's a humbling thought.
Definitely humbling. Speaking of humbling experiences, I had a brush with hypothermia a while back. I was on a solo hiking trip. It was a stark reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, how easy it is to underestimate the cold.
You hear these heroic survival stories, but it's rarely that simple.
Exactly. It made me realize that preparation, respecting the environment, and honestly assessing your own limitations is crucial when you're out in those conditions.
It's a wake-up call.
It was. It really brought home the fact that survival in the cold isn't just about physical toughness.
Yeah.
It's about mental resilience, too.
Being able to stay calm.
Exactly. Keeping a clear head when everything around you is trying to shut down.
Finding that spark of hope, even when it seems like the world is against you.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've gone from personal stories to some complex scientific concepts, from chilling tales to, well, some sobering realities. One thing is clear. The cold is so much more than just a temperature.
It's a force that shapes our world, tests our limits, and reveals a lot about who we are.
And as we continue our exploration in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve even deeper into the cold's impact on history, on society, and how it shapes our understanding of the universe.
It's going to be an exciting journey. Buckle up. Welcome back to our icy exploration.
Before we move on, I think it's important to remember something we touched on earlier.
What's that?
We talk about conquering nature.
Right.
But the cold, it's not something you conquer.
It's definitely not.
It's a force that demands respect, understanding.
Absolutely. And that respect, that's evident in how the cold has shaped human history.
For centuries, it's been this formidable adversary, pushing humans to their limits.
Forcing them to adapt to survive.
Think about those early explorers venturing into uncharted territories. Brutal winters, limited resources, technology that we take for granted today, they didn't have any of that.
Their stories are incredible. Hardship, ingenuity, and sometimes, well, tragedy.
Like Richard Byrd's Antarctic adventure.
Oh, a perfect example. Pushing himself to the very edge in the name of exploration.
And almost paying the ultimate price.
He really did. It drives home the point that you don't mess with the cold.
You don't. You understand it, you adapt to it, you don't try to conquer it.
Exactly.
And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of cold. Its power to preserve.
We talked about permafrost acting like a giant freezer, holding ancient organisms and artifacts.
Right, like snapshots from the past.
But it can also preserve human bodies, sometimes in ways that challenge our understanding of human endurance.
It makes you think of cryonics, preserving bodies, hoping to revive them in the future.
Still science fiction territory, but there are real-life examples of people surviving incredible cold for extended periods.
So saying cold dead hands isn't always accurate.
Not quite. Medically speaking, you're not dead until you're warm and dead.
It's crazy to think about some of those cases. People being revived after hours in freezing temperatures, clinically dead.
It's remarkable how the cold slows down those biological processes, buys you precious time.
I think there's even a doctor, they call him Professor Popsicle, for his work in this field.
He's dedicated his career to studying those cold-related medical phenomena.
And he believes there's no temperature too low to give up on saving someone.
It really challenges conventional medical wisdom.
It makes you wonder what we'll discover as we learn more.
Exactly. And speaking of discoveries, the cold can preserve things in ways that are both fascinating and, well, a little unsettling.
Like what?
Imagine finding a 5,000-year-old mummified man being able to determine what he ate just hours before his death.
Wow. The cold locks it all in time.
It really does. But those glimpses into the past, they can be scientifically valuable and ethically challenging.
I see what you mean.
For example, as permafrost thaws, it's not just those ancient organisms being exposed.
Right.
It's remnants of more recent history, like that 1600s whaling graveyard in Spitsbergen, Norway, human bones literally rising from the ground.
That's a powerful image. And a little unsettling.
It is a stark reminder that the cold can preserve stories, and sometimes those stories are best left undisturbed.
It's like the cold is whispering secrets from the past, and we have to decide whether to listen.
And sometimes those secrets are terrifying.
Like that anthrax outbreak in Russia a few years back.
Oh, right, where a heat wave exposed those frozen reindeer carcasses from 75 years ago.
And released that dormant bacteria.
Exactly. A chilling reminder that the cold can harbor dangers we might not even be aware of.
Dangers with global implications.
As we discussed, sawing permafrost releases massive amounts of greenhouse gases.
Contributing to climate change, speeding up that thawing process.
A feedback loop with potentially disastrous consequences.
It does feel like something out of a science fiction horror movie.
Speaking of science fiction, the cold has inspired some incredible stories, thought-provoking stories.
From Jack London's To Build a Fire, to those apocalyptic landscapes in films like The Shining and The Thing.
The cold becomes a symbol of isolation, vulnerability, the relentless power of nature.
And then there are video games, like Frostpunk,
where you have to lead a society through a brutal ice age.
making tough choices about resources, survival, what it means to be human in the face of extreme conditions.
A unique perspective on surviving in the cold.
It highlights the need for resilience, but also cooperation innovation.
Finding ways to adapt, pushing the limits, ultimately finding a way to coexist with the cold.
Rather than trying to conquer it.
Exactly. And even seemingly lighter stories, like the Little House books, offer glimpses into life in a world dominated by cold.
Laura Ingalls Wilder captured both the beauty and brutality of life on the prairie, where winter was a constant presence.
It was. Remember that story about the children who froze to death in their cabin during a blizzard because they ran out of firewood?
It's a haunting story.
It is, and it underscores the importance of preparation, the fragility of life when facing extreme cold.
That fragility is amplified when we remember the cold's indifference.
It's not about being tough or brave. It's about understanding the science, respecting the limits, being prepared.
And that brings us back to my own near hypothermia experience.
Your wake-up call.
It was. It reminded me that even with modern gear, being relatively close to help, the cold can turn dangerous quickly if you're not careful.
Your story highlights a crucial point. The cold often reveals our vulnerabilities. Those cracks in our preparedness or judgment that we might not even see.
It's humbling.
It is. It makes you realize that surviving the cold isn't just about physical strength.
There's a mental aspect to it too. Resilience.
Being able to stay calm, focused, when everything around you is trying to shut you down.
Finding that inner strength, that spark of hope, even when the world seems against you.
And sometimes it's about knowing when to ask for help, recognizing that you can't do it all alone.
We started talking about the cold's indifference, and now we're talking about the importance of connection, of support in surviving it.
We've come full circle.
We have. The cold forces us to confront our limitations, but it also reminds us we're not alone in this struggle.
It's a paradox, isn't it? It can isolate us, push us to the brink, but it can also bring us together.
Foster resilience, a deeper appreciation for warmth, for human connection.
That's beautifully put, that connection, that shared experience. It's something we see reflected in stories about the cold throughout history.
From ancient myths about winter spirits to modern tales of survival, there's this recurring theme of finding strength and unity.
When facing a force that could so easily overwhelm us.
A powerful reminder that even against nature's indifference, we have the capacity for compassion, for courage, for ingenuity.
And those are essential not just for navigating literal cold, but those metaphorical chills that life throws at us.
Absolutely. So we've explored the cold's impact on individuals, on societies, but where do we go from here?
That's where things get really interesting. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore the future of humanity's relationship with the cold, and how a world grappling with climate change will reshape that relationship.
Stay tuned. It's going to be a thought-provoking journey. So we've journeyed through the cold's impact on individuals, on societies, even touched on the science of absolute zero. But now we're facing a future where our relationship with cold is being reshaped by a force we've been circling around this whole time.
Climate change.
Exactly.
It really challenges how we understand and adapt to the cold.
We're already seeing the effects on winter weather patterns, right? More intense storms, those unpredictable temperature swings, and like you mentioned before, a shrinking cryosphere.
The cryosphere, all those frozen parts of the Earth, glaciers, ice sheets, sea ice, permafrost, they're crucial for regulating the planet's climate, reflecting sunlight, influencing ocean currents.
So as the cryosphere shrinks, we can expect even more dramatic changes in those weather patterns.
Exactly. And those changes have a ripple effect on everything, agriculture, infrastructure, even human health, migration patterns.
We talked about the consequences of unprepared infrastructure in Texas. Those events are like a preview of the challenges ahead for everyone.
Our societies are built on a certain level of predictability when it comes to winter. As that predictability disappears, it exposes our vulnerabilities.
It's a bit unsettling to think about. What can we actually do in the face of such a complex problem? Is there any hope of finding a balance, coexisting with the cold in a way that ensures, well, human well-being and environmental sustainability?
I believe there is. But it takes a shift in our mindset. We need to move past this idea of conquering nature.
Towards a more collaborative approach.
Yes, recognizing that we're part of a complex, interconnected system, investing in resilient infrastructure, developing sustainable technologies.
And really fostering a deeper understanding of how our planet's systems are all linked together.
Absolutely.
It sounds like a monumental task. Not just scientific innovation, but societal, even political will.
It does. We need policies that put environmental protection first, investments in renewable energy, a commitment to addressing those root causes of climate change. It's multifaceted, but we can't afford to ignore it.
And it requires collective action. It's not just governments, corporations, it's individuals too.
Every effort counts, whether it's reducing your carbon footprint, advocating for change, or even just learning more about the issues. We all have a part to play in shaping a more sustainable future.
It brings us back to that concept of the cold's indifference. It's a reminder that nature responds to our actions, not our intentions.
The cold doesn't care about our hopes or fears. It just is. We need to understand its power, respect its limits, find ways to live in harmony with it.
This deep dive has taken us through history, science, literature, even personal experiences. And it's clear that the cold is so much more than a temperature on a thermometer.
It's a force that's shaped our world, challenged us, inspired us.
And as we head into a future where our relationship with cold is increasingly defined by climate change, we have to remember those lessons.
Embrace resilience, innovation, that deep respect for the power of nature.
We hope this deep dive has left you with a new appreciation for the cold, its beauty, its challenges.
And empowered you to take action to help shape a future where humanity thrives in a world where cold continues to be a powerful force.
Thanks for joining us on this chilly exploration. Stay warm out there and keep those minds curious.